Franklin Park is gorgeous. It's a wilderness full of trees and birds and air and openness.
You can feel your heart rate slow as you step into the park. You can feel stress levels go down.
Folks walk around here. You can see folks playing chess or checkers. It's a community.
What do you like about the park? You like the slide?
Yeah.
If you want to kick a ball around, if you want to fly a kite, the kid can be a kid.
That's really important, to have an opportunity to live and thrive and have fun in a place that is inherently your place, your park.
Parks are essential for both physical and mental health, and that's why it's so important that we invest in them and understand the importance of keeping them forever public.
Situated 7 miles from downtown, Franklin Park was designed by Frederick Law Olmsted in 1885 for the city of Boston.
Franklin Park is usually considered by historians as one of the 3 great urban parks Olmsted designed: Central Park, Prospect Park, and Franklin Park.
Encompassing about 500 acres, Franklin Park is the largest component of a linked system of public landscapes that is now known as Boston's Emerald Necklace.
The Emerald Necklace, the concept that Frederick Law Olmsted was trying to convey was that a dense urban city needed green corridors that could allow people to be in the city in a way that would bring them away from the hustle and bustle of urban life. And I think more and more we all understand the importance of that. Scientifically, instinctually, he knew these things naturally.
Frederick Olmsted wrote extensively about what these parks could mean for American society. And what they mean is a place where all people could come together and share in common experiences, common values, and reaffirm a sense of community. It's not just about creating a beautiful landscape. It's about improving society itself. It's about safeguarding the physical and mental and emotional well-being of people in the city.
As the third and final of Olmsted's great urban parks, Franklin Park is the most mature expression of his art and intentions.
When you look at any of the large parks Olmsted designed, it's always about the geology of the site. One place you see this, interestingly, is in the site structures. The boulder masonry that's mostly Roxbury pudding stone, that's mostly quarried on the site, is used everywhere for structures, for buildings. The overall landscape was already shaped by the drumlin topography. Those are the hills of gravel and rock left by the last ice age. And so that led to a natural division between the high ground of the top of the drumlin that became the anti-park and the larger part of the park, the country park, which was the long, shallow valley.
The country park consisted of wilderness areas and open meadows designed for leisure. The anti-park was intended to be a half-mile-long promenade lined with playgrounds, concert grounds, and a restaurant to draw people into the park.
The anti-park section was not completed by the time Olmsted retired in 1895, and so the park didn't draw the numbers of people that it should have as the largest and most important park in Boston.
Though the anti-park was never built as Olmsted envisioned it, a zoo was opened in 1912 and began to bring more visitors to Franklin Park. Complete with a tree-lined promenade entrance, the zoo was unfenced, free, and open to the public.
So if we can say the park is essentially completed in 1912, and during the interwar period is heavily visited by millions of Bostonians every year, things do start to change after the Second World War.
When Franklin Park was first conceived, the surrounding neighborhoods of Roxbury, Dorchester, and Jamaica Plain were being populated by a growing middle class of Irish, Italian, German, Jewish, and Canadian descent. In the decades following World War II, the neighborhoods around the park experienced a dramatic demographic shift, often described as white flight. White residents moved out, usually to more distant suburbs. Black people moved in, along with new immigrants from the Caribbean and elsewhere.
At one time, this park was very well maintained. At one time, this park held so much promise and opportunities for the neighbors. As the communities changed and they had less affluence and influence, the resources of the park changed.
Landscape maintenance all but disappeared. The condition of the park deteriorated, and the zoo developed into a national scandal. Boston had given up on Franklin Park.
Because of the official neglect, and frankly, because of institutionalized racism in the city of Boston, Franklin Park was devalued. And so you have projects like Shattuck Hospital and the Schoolboy Stadium being built, and the zoo being fenced off and charging an admission. And so these different institutions are being cited in Franklin Park as if the overall park no longer had the same value.
There are ruins today in Franklin Park, which is not something that I come across in other major urban park systems. Pieces of the park that originally had buildings or other amenities burned down, were destroyed, and have been sort of left in that condition.
We refuse to see the park go into the doldrums, whether it's ignorance or racism or any other challenge that afflicted their thinking because people didn't see the neighborhoods around there as being important. We knew the importance of this park, and we weren't willing to let it slip into oblivion.
It's a group of neighborhood residents who really reclaim the park. And for the last 50 or 60 years, it's been the neighborhoods around the park that have been the salvation of the park. And that, above all, was led by the arts educator and activist Elma Lewis.
I stand.
And she comes to what was then the ruins of the overlooked shelter, and with a group of volunteers, cleans up the foundations and creates a theater.
From 1966 through 1978, concerts and theatrical performances were held there every summer evening, drawing thousands to the park.
I don't know how to inspire young people who are Black if every time something becomes Black, you have to get up and run away from it. No, it's your obligation to stay there and make it work.
The tradition was revived in 2003, and it continues today.
The Elma Lewis Playhouse in the park was an integral part of the park's activities in the summertime. She was using this park as a way of introducing people to Shakespeare, to jazz, introducing them to classical music. It's wonderful to be in a place where the cool breezes are coming and the families would be introduced to cultural opportunities, social opportunities that come at no special cost to them.
Since 1896, golf has been played regularly in Franklin Park. As the city's only public course until the 1930s, it was more open to women and Black players compared to Boston's other courses. But after World War II, the course fell into disrepair along with the rest of the park. It remained that way until the late 60s, when a group of Black players formed the Franklin Park Golf Association in order to save the course.
There were a lot of African-American folks that kept this park alive. When I first came up here, there were tin cans and the greens, and, it was muddy. The old guard, they took care of it.
The park had never been forgotten because the Black golfers would bring their lawnmowers in the back of their cars, and they would mow the grass around the first 9 holes. They really loved this park, and they loved the opportunity to play golf.
In 1971, Elma Lewis and other community leaders founded the Franklin Park Coalition. This organization would have a decisive influence on the future of the park.
There was always this support and desire to see the park be maintained and upkept, and that it stayed open, most importantly, open to the public. That's how and why the Franklin Park Coalition was started. And we came together, started to raise funds and take on the issues of basic park maintenance.
People like Elma Lewis and Richard Heath and Matthew Good and other people got together and started advocating for the park. And they started doing things that would make, this Olmsted creation a valuable resource to the city.
Whereas parks like Central Park and Prospect Park have been able to draw on dense urban neighborhoods, often very affluent, to fund conservancies that have multi-million-dollar annual budgets, Franklin Park is a very different story. It cannot draw on the same kind of affluent neighborhoods. And so really a new model for understanding how we can restore Franklin Park and allow it to reach its full potential as a landscape again is needed.
Millions of dollars have recently become available from the City of Boston to restore the park. To guide this work, community leaders, city officials, and landscape architects have created the Franklin Park Action Plan. Shaped by neighborhood residents' input and by a deep understanding of the park's history and potential, the Action Plan outlines a vision for the park's future. It calls for city-funded maintenance, programming, and a focus on community-led decision-making.
Right now, we're in the middle of one of the biggest moments in infrastructure investment that the city and the state has ever seen.
As we look forward to the city now finally, after decades of official neglect, investing major amounts of money in the park, the question is, how should the city move forward? How can these communities be recognized and be part of the new investment and the new restoration of the park?
Those who did not neglect the park, did not run away, maybe because they couldn't run away, but those who worked to maintain the park should always be thought of in context of what happens at the park. And they should never, ever privatize any aspect of the park.
We're at a historical crux. Which way is Olmsted's legacy, this African-American community's legacy, going to go?
The new action plan doesn't attempt to reinvent Franklin Park. The best thing about it is it recognizes that the existing park was never abandoned, at least not by the people around the park. The question is whether city administrations will also share in that spirit and that overall goal for the future of the park, or if they will continue ad hoc development projects that reflect attitudes that resulted from institutionalized racism that devalued the park.
There is a conversation about ripping down Shattuck Hospital and moving most of the uses to another part of Boston. What was surprising and disappointing is that when that conversation occurred, there was never consideration for returning all of that land back to parkland. What we heard loud and clear in the action plan is that everyone wants improvements in the park. Everyone wants improvements to White Stadium, but they want those things to remain public.
As the wilderness is open, the Scarborough Pond is open, the Valley Gates is open to the public, the Schoolboy Stadium should never be sectioned or closed off. Restriction of access is totally inconsistent with Olmsted's design and purpose for creating a park in the middle of a city that was growing.
The most important fact is that people continue to use and love Franklin Park for exactly the reasons Olmsted envisioned.
The park is for all of us, and because they're open to everybody, it's an example of justice. Parks give you space to run, jump, make noise, be quiet. Everybody in the city needs a place where they can wind down and be away from the cement.
To learn more about American landscape history, visit LALH.org.